Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my second channel. Welcome back to Jack in the Books. Today, I'm joined by a very, very special guest, Bethan Roberts. Welcome.
Hello, so
Thank you
nice
so
to
much for
be
joining.
here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. I am so excited. You are the author of the gorgeously melancholy and just beautifully, exquisitely written My Policeman. I'm so excited to be chatting with you because this is a book that I have loved for years.
I
Do you
love
mind
that
quickly?
gorgeously melancholy. I love that. That's really
I
can I can I
think all
use
things should be
that?
gorgeously melancholy, right?
Everything should be gorgeously melancholy. Yes, everything is, isn't it?
I think so. Would you mind telling us all, for those who have been living under a rock and have not yet read this beautiful book, what it's about, who we follow?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So My Policeman is a novel about three people. And two of them are in love with the same man. So one is called Marion. She's a school teacher. And when she's very young, she meets the brother of her best friend, who's called Tom, who is training to be a policeman at that time. And he is a kind of all round, kind of gorgeous bombshell of a character. He's a sea swimmer. And Marion falls for him very hard. And unbeknownst to her, the other person who is in love with Tom is a slightly older character called Patrick Hazelwood, who is a museum curator. And the novel kind of follows, I suppose, the consequences of this three-way relationship.
Yeah, I love thinking of him as like a bombshell, but I think that word in my head now is completely corrupted by Love Island. I imagine like Tom entering the villa.
Oh, oh,
And
I
he does
must
sort of emerge
confess,
from the sea too.
he does, doesn't he? And like Neptune kind of thing, yes,
Yeah,
swinging
exactly.
off Bladerack, and I think I had that in the novel. Yes, so that's probably appropriate, right?
Yeah. And speaking of kind of introductions and getting to know these characters, one thing that really sticks with me about this novel is the opening line because it's genius, or the opening kind of paragraph. I have it here. I might read it out just to give everyone a little teaser,
Oh,
if that's
okay.
okay.
Yeah.
So you open with, I considered starting with these words, I no longer want to kill you because I really don't, but then decided you would think this far too melodramatic. You've always hated melodrama, and I don't want to upset you, not now, in the state you're in, not at what may be the end of your life. That is so genius. That captures you straight away. I was hooked.
Oh,
Is the opening line a really important part of your kind of writing process? And does it come to you right at the beginning of your process?
no, no. And I always tell my students, don't worry about the opening line. Don't worry, just like dive in wherever you want to and literally cherry pick the scene, that you want to write, because
Mm.
otherwise it's going to be really hard. And you can sort of, you can spend a lot of time thinking, oh my God, I can't start the novel because I haven't got that, killer opening line.
Yeah.
And the truth is that there are a lot of different ways of opening a novel. What you have to do is just take the reader by the hand and lead them in. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. You can do it very gently. Say, come with me into this story. I want to show you something, or you can just go, here you go, yank, and you're coming with me,
Yeah.
both ways are good. And I think there are lots of different ways to start a novel, and you definitely shouldn't be hung up on it. Having said that, I think uh, I don't know where the line came from, or when it came, but it certainly didn't come at the beginning.
Mm.
I think I actually started by writing about Tom and Patrick, and maybe their meeting was the first thing that I wrote of the whole novel. Um, but when I think when I wrote that line, I thought, oh, I kind of I've got Marion now. She's in this place, this difficult place
Mm.
where Marion is.
Yeah.
And also I've got the kind of trouble that is going to bring things to a head. So I can tell those two stories essentially. The stories of how they all met and how that unfolded, but also the story of now, in the 90s, and how that initial story has affected their whole lives, really.
Mm. Yeah. And you kind of mentioned there about having these multiple stories essentially within the same narrative, because perspective is really important in this book.
Yeah.
We have three perspectives, but we only really hear from two. I wondered how important having different POVs is to you when you're writing.
Yeah. It is important, and I think I don't think I've written a novel that hasn't got more than one
Mm,
view in it, you know. And the reason really is probably quite lazy on my part. It's like, you know, as soon as you have a different point of view, you have drama
yeah.
because everybody sees things differently, right? We're all a star of our own little movie that's playing out in our minds, you know, and we never know what anybody else is thinking. So, you know, but the thing the novel can do that is really exciting is, you know, it can show you what other people are thinking, apparently. Um, so, you know, once you've got those two points of view, you have that kind of tension and conflict immediately built in because here's this scene, but here's how this other person saw this scene, and it was rather different, wasn't it? You know, and that's certainly the case with Patrick and Marion. And you know, I did think about writing from Tom's point of view too, and I
Yeah.
started to do it. I remember, I don't know whether I still have it. I must look, but I
Oh,
started
wow.
to do it, and I was aware that it just wasn't as good because it was like, you know, when I started doing that, the tension just kind of went out a bit because then the
Mm,
reader knows what Tom's thinking. And that's a bit like then Patrick and Marion knowing what Tom's thinking,
yeah.
right? They never know what he's thinking. So, you know, so he remains this kind of, you know, adored, bewitching love object. And that's kind of what I wanted, I suppose, in the novel. So if he starts to speak, it kind of takes a bit of that magic away. And also, I think, you know, I mean, somebody else said to me, and I hadn't thought of it, but I was really pleased that somebody else had, that, you know, Tom's position is all about silence. You know, he cannot
Mhm.
speak because of
Mm,
who he is. You know, he's a copper, he's a working class lad, and he's gay. So, you know, he cannot say anything to anyone apart from Patrick. Patrick is slightly different because, you know, he's cultured, he's in the elite, you know, he's a museum curator, he has gay mates.
yeah.
So, you know, he's got some kind of release and some voice, you know, and Tom really hasn't. So, you know, I was pleased that that was kind of reflected in the novel.
Yeah, and I suppose it feels appropriate that the other two characters would be writing down their thoughts and would be considering their thoughts in that way, whereas Tom maybe would be a lot more introspective and it would be a bit
Right.
more of a muddle. Like he wouldn't have ever actually organized his thoughts out into prose, into paragraphs, into something that
No.
can be read that way. So yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, Tom definitely is in a model.
Yeah.
Mm.
We have to talk about the setting, which is Brighton.
Oh, yeah.
As someone who grew up in the area, reading this book was such a vivid experience. I felt like I was walking down every lane and every seafront with the characters. Did you go to Brighton a lot of times while you were writing this book? Did you kind of walk the routes that you imagined Tom walking?
Yes, Jack, I live in Brighton. I'm right here, right now. This
Incredible.
is in Brighton. I'm looking out the window at Brighton. Oh, well, I mean, to be honest, I'm looking out the window at my washing, but it is the Brighton washing. So
It's Brighton washing with Brighton air.
totally, it's all over. So yeah, so I came to Brighton as a student, probably like a lot of people, maybe like you, I don't know, and I stayed, you know, like a lot of people because
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful and exciting, vibrant place to be. Um, and I'd wanted to write about it for a long time, you know. And so when this story kind of started coming to life, I suppose in my mind, I was thinking this is a really good Brighton story, you know.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was really easy for me to walk around all the locations, and you know, I know the locations very well. I've lived in some of them, so it was a real pleasure to be able to write about where I live and you know the
Mm.
place that I love really.
Yeah. Oh, and you capture it so beautifully. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed reading it. um, how much research did you need to do into the kind of time period and what Brighton was like at the time in which the novel is set? Did you kind of have
Mm.
to go into a few rabbit holes where you're kind of researching all these things? I feel that authors always have very interesting kind of Google search histories where they've had to research very niche things.
Well, you know, what you got to remember is the book, when I wrote the book, I mean, it was about like, it's over 10 years ago that I started writing the book.
Yeah.
So, you know, the research I was probably doing like 12, 13 years ago. So I wasn't doing Google
Yeah.
searches like I would do now, you know, and it was
Hmm.
because it kind of wasn't as big. And also at the time, it was a bit frowned upon for authors to do Google
Right.
research, right? So that's not proper. I mean, now it's totally fine. Everybody's
Yeah.
over, but you know, and also it's a lot better. You know, the resources on the net are just so much better. But at the time, it wasn't really that. It was more like I went to the local studies library, which was
Mm.
in at the time in the Brighton Museum itself. So I was literally in the museum that I was writing about, doing the
Oh,
research. I wrote quite a lot of the book in the museum because I used to go in
wow.
the cafe in the museum and write. So there was that, and there was also a wonderful collection of oral histories of gay and lesbian experiences in Brighton in the 1950s called Daring Hearts, which is published by Queen's Park Books. And that just gave me, you know, those voices and that kind of, you know, that kind of fine-grained, nitty-gritty detail of, you know,
Mm.
what happened where and how it felt, you know, which is what you need. You need that kind of sense-based experience, and that's in there in spades. So, you know, I stole a lot of stuff from there. You know, 'cause that's what novelists do, just steal stuff. I like kind of magpies, you know, going shiny things in our mucky beaks. Um, so yeah, there was that as well. And you know, I watched a lot of film, and I had some lovely archive that I think I got from Screen Southeast or something of, you know, Brighton Pier in the 50s, and or just, you know, and it look, and the film does a great job of capturing that, you know, the feel of that era. The colours of it are just
Oh
so
yeah.
brilliant. Yeah,
Oh, it's beautiful just to watch. And I was just sitting there letting all those colors and the images just wash over me, because it's a real treat for your eyes to
yeah,
sit and watch as well. When
yeah.
you were writing the novel, did it feel very visual to you? Could you kind of imagine it being on a screen? Did you sort of imagine what the opening shot would look like, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I think it was very visual
Mhm.
because it always is, you know, and it kind of has to be because I think, you know, when you're writing, you are kind of hopefully imagining what it's like to be in the body of your characters, and you're seeing things through their eyes and you're feeling things, you know, through their bodies. So, you know, that in itself has to be very visual. So, you know, I did imagine it visually, but I don't think I ever imagined it as a movie, you know, because a
Yeah,
novel is a very different beast
of course.
to a film, isn't it? You know, I mean, it's you know, it's much more leisurely for a start. So, I wasn't really imagining it as a film at all. I was imagining it, you know, as a book,
Yeah.
but you know, obviously, hopefully, a very visual book.
Yeah. And what is the experience like of going to the cinema, sitting down and seeing your world come to life on the screen?
It is very surreal, you know, it's really, really odd
Yeah.
and very exciting and overwhelming, you know. I mean, the first time I saw it, you know, it felt very emotional because I did, you know, felt like I really sort of deeply recognized the story, you know,
Yeah.
and you know, and I could really see the characters, and feel like that, you know, that they had a kind of very deep connection to the characters that I'd put on the page. You know, obviously they are different now because, you know, they've gone through several layers, haven't they?
Yeah.
You know, they've gone through a scriptwriter and a director, and then they are translated by the actors. So you know it's something else, but I think it's a wonderful something else, you know.
Yeah.
um and to be honest, it did just feel, it felt really exposing, you know, because like, you know, when you're sitting down writing your novel at the desk, it feels very private actually,
Yeah.
you know. You kind of have to you allow yourself that fantasy of this is just me and the page, you know, and I am. And actually, you know, in a way that isn't a fantasy because for me, you know, my novels don't get read by a lot of people, or they didn't, you know. So I wasn't kind of expecting it to be really out there. So to
Yeah.
see it, you know, literally larger than life up there, it's quite staggering, and you know, it's totally magical.
Yeah. And of course, like you said, the actors and this exquisite cast just bring the characters to life so much. Did you get a say on like who was cast? Did you get to see pictures of who was going to play each character? Was it crazy seeing a casting director say, we think this is Tom, or we think this is Marion, you know? Was that a kind of strange
I didn't
experience for you?
I didn't get a a direct say. That's not kind of how it worked. I handed it over to them, and I was
Yeah,
glad that I handed it over because actually I think if I'd have tried to be involved, it would have been a really different experience.
yeah,
I really trusted Robbie Rogers, the producer
mm,
who bought the option because I knew that he loved the book and the book meant a great deal to him personally. So I kind of just made the decision to totally trust him. And, I'm glad that I did.
yeah,
So the casting, they did ask me though, who, if you got people in mind, and the truth was I really didn't because
yeah,
to me they sort of live in my mind, and
yeah.
matching them to actual people is
Yeah, you're
what
like, what do you mean these aren't real people?
I know. It's like, well, what? No, he exists. He's
Just
here.
give Marion a call. Like
Me,
she'll
I'll
be
do
here.
them all.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to see a one-woman show. That could be
Oh my
incredible.
God, that's such a good idea. He's going to take that on. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that was weird, but I made a list, and I sent it off to them, and I believe that I'm right in saying that Rupert Everett was on that list of
Okay.
people I would like to play older Patrick. So I'm so pleased that it's him.
Yeah.
And I think maybe Gina McKee also was on that initial list because she's been a kind of acting, hero of mine for a long
Mm,
time.
yeah.
So, and obviously, I'm totally delighted with the casting. I mean, it's like, it's kind of acting royalty, isn't it? And, Harry Styles, I mean, who would have thought that my novel would be a movie starring Harry Styles? I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Take the compliment on that one.
And that's the kind of star power that you need to get a movie made. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing.
And it's really exciting getting to see him play with that character as well and see what
Yes.
he does with it too. So I really enjoyed seeing you know, because I've read this book multiple times too. So I was thinking like I had an kind of an expectation of what it was going to be, and it's always so interesting to see how someone else interprets the character.
Yeah.
And it's really, really gorgeous. Have you seen the film so many times at this point?
I have seen it a few times now.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. Yes, yes, I
I feel like every time someone came over to my house, I'd be like, come on, let's watch the movie.
have. Oh dear, you're putting them through the ringer every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. I'm very, very excited that more people are going to get to experience this movie and then hopefully go and read the book too, because it's like I said, it's kind of a heart-wrenching book, but it's also full of hope and joy as well. So it's the perfect mix. And that's why I always really champion on this channel is like, an emotional heptathlon. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah,
So
very good. Oh, I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased that you liked it, and it's
yeah,
really
I loved it. So
character.
thank you so much, Bethan Roberts. Thank you so much
Oh,
for everyone for watching this video. Like I said, you can get a copy of the book, you can watch the movie. It's very, very good. And thank you so much for watching this video. Goodbye.